Sorry Ocarina of Time, I know I said you were up next, but the Nioh 2 Alpha came out of nowhere. Also, let's take a deep breath and relax. The title is a joke, Nioh is its own thing, I know this. In fact, I made a video about it. One of my most beloved videos of all time. Look, we'll get to Nioh 1.5 in a minute, but I don't care that it's been 2 years, it's time to address my magnum opus. How to best summarize it in one sentence. This might be the worst video I've ever made. For starters, there's a handful of incorrect information matched with an embarrassing lack of it overall that gives the commentary a sense of ignorance that must have been pretty frustrating for fans of the game to listen to. Beyond that, the purpose of the video is completely lost due to its structure. The intended point of the video can be summarized as, I went in with full hype and expectations that it would be like Souls, and when it wasn't a carbon copy, I got butthurt. But by the end of my playtime with the game, I realized that I shouldn't have bought into the hype and let it color my perspective on the game. It was never meant to be a review of Nioh, it was meant to be a review of expectations, you know, like in the title. The problem is the structure of the video is muddled. I only spend the first and final 2 minutes talking about how my viewpoint was unfairly skewed. The core 15 minutes are spent talking impressions, and I spent too little time getting to know Nioh as its own game. In my 6 hours playing the Alpha and Nioh 2, I feel like I have a far better understanding than I ever did in my 13 hours with Nioh. And that's because I bothered to take my time, did my best to understand different mechanics, and looked at it as its own IP. With that under my belt, I think Nioh is a lot deeper than I ever gave it credit for and deserves to be judged as its own project. So to right my wrongs, I'll absolutely cover Nioh before the full release of its sequel. But this time I'll take a more balanced look. It'll still be biased like all my non-community based videos, but hey, it's my channel and as long as I don't quarter acid, I'm entitled to my opinion. Speaking of opinions, what did I think of the Nioh 2 Alpha? Well, now that your 27-month-old pitchforks are stowed, let me tell you. You start out in the character creator. I was pretty stoked to be able to create my own character this time around. The models are pretty impressive too, if you know what I mean. You can even play as Sekiro. Look at that, it's uncanny. What follows is either a tutorial that is nearly identical to the first games, or you can jump straight into the first mission. You'll quickly stumble upon a shrine. There you can replenish your healing, get blessings for the Kodamas you save, change up your spirits, sell loot for Amarita, which is effectively experience, and equip magic and ninjutsu. Even that sentence alone has a ton to unpack that I never covered before. Collecting Kodamas in the level allows you to pay a small amount of gold for buffs that can increase your Amarita gains, elixir drops, and more. It seems that if you collect enough, you get a higher base of replenishable elixirs each time you return to a shrine as well, which is a really nice perk. The healing system is still the same with a base of 3 elixirs and a max of 8 from either looting them in the world, gaining them as rewards for breaking down gear, or collecting enough Kodamas. I'm still not the biggest fan of farming for a higher level of healing, but the Kodama buffs make it dramatically less painful than it could be otherwise. Plus, there are other ways to heal such as magic, and if you don't use it to heal, you can cast the elements at your enemies or slap them on your weapon. The amount of variety you can carry is capped primarily by your magic stat, which is great balance considering they are replenishable upon rest. It's the same with ninjutsu, which focuses more on traps or tools that allow for ingenuity in how you approach certain situations. I love that the tools and magic are automatically replenished every time you rest and are baked directly into your character's development, since both of these abilities are gained using skills. There are 7 main skills in the game, 1 for magic, 1 for ninjutsu, 4 for the main weapon types, and there's a center skill tree that gives overall character buffs. They look like damn constellations, but despite their daunting appearance at first glance, it's pretty intuitive after the initial shock. Through leveling, you'll be able to unlock new magic, ninjutsu, combos, passive buffs, and more. My favorite part is that you gain skill points simply by using the related item. The more you use magic, the more skill points you get for it. You also find items throughout the world that give you a free skill point toward each category. I can't emphasize enough how natural it all feels. It lets you grow your abilities organically as your skill with each tool in your arsenal becomes more adept. It makes every point feel earned and allows you to progressively expand your repertoire at an easily digestible pace. Speaking of weapons, most of them make a return. If I remember correctly, there were 5 weapon types at the start of Nioh to choose from. At least in the alpha, there are some tweaks to this. The sword, big fucking sword, and spear all make a return, but it looks like the dual swords are replaced by dual axes. You can throw those at range, which is a nice addition to the bow, rifle, and hand cannon. All the weapons feel great to use, have their own pros and cons, and I found myself using each at some point throughout my time with the alpha. The sword felt like an all-rounder. Not particularly great at anything, but decent speed, range, and recovery. The spear feels as good as I remember. It's got a lot of powerful overhead swings to do heavy damage and faster sweeps to deal with crowds. It's balanced well though by its limitations in small space. The axes were a lot of fun to use, but I never feel like I even got close to their full potential. Their damage is naturally naturally low for their attack speed, but I found that a few swings of something else often work better and at lower risk considering their very small direct melee range. Finally, the big fucking sword was probably my favorite weapon. There was definitely a strong commitment when swinging the thing around, but it felt the most deliberate and controlled for me. Even so, they all feel excellent, and I kept changing what I was using based on the best drops I was getting. Though I have to admit I did find myself underutilizing the stance system. About 90% of my combat was spent in mid-stance since I saw no reason to change it up initially. Eventually there were enemies that pushed me toward using a low stance for better mobility and a high stance for better damage, but that was mostly limited to bosses. That said, changing stances with your key bursts is a masterful way to get the most out of combat, and the different combos you can get out of each are a nice change of pace. One notable change to combat, or at least one I don't remember from the first game, are the spirit attacks. In rare cases, enemies will drop soul orbs. You can purify these at shrines and attach them to your guardian spirits for an attack that is reminiscent of the enemies that drop them. You can equip 2 in combination based on how powerful each one is, and they cost different amounts of a third red bar that accumulates as you attack enemies. Finally, living weapon has been replaced with the yokai form. You can transform into a demon and go ham. It's basically living weapon as far as I remember, but the form you take seems to be changed based on the spirit. All in all, the combat feels fantastic. I love the high skill cap and reward of the key pulse system, the different stances add layers to the combat, and I enjoy the weight behind all the movements. You have to be very deliberate in each move you make or the punishment is heavy. I'm still awful at remembering to block, so getting comboed to death was pretty common. Which brings me to the things I didn't like about the combat. It's a personal gripe, but I felt that the 2 or 3 hit wombo combo deaths happened a little bit too often, but I think it does boil down to my stubborn refusal to block. By far my biggest actual complaint is enemy tracking. I would wager it's because many attacks are meant to be blocked instead of dodged, and you can give yourself better mobility with low stance and lighter weaponry, but there are so many enemies that can 180 flip on a dime champion Gundyr style. With this game putting a heavy emphasis on smart positioning, it's frustrating when enemies don't follow the same rules and can abuse impossible physics and timing. Overall though, while these complaints add a bit of irritation, it's not nearly enough to sully a deep rewarding combat system that I'm looking forward to exploring further. When it comes to the level design, it's excellent. I love the branching paths that encourage you to explore, your limited healing gives a sense of tension as you further explore, and the 2 levels I played have many meaningful shortcuts and loot to reward your curiosity. Exploring the level can be made easier by summoning friendly spirits to eat up aggro. You are able to summon them using an item you get by killing AI-controlled versions of fallen players called Revenants. It's a great twist on the idea of summoning help to force you to kill the phantoms of other players first, so I love the implementation. If you'd like to refrain from using summons, the many different paths, range weapon, magic, ninjutsu, items, and weapon types give so many different ways to approach encounters. Even with all those tools to assist, there is an oddly pleasurable sense of dread knowing that if you make an error, you could lose all your progress at any time. It made me be much more careful when moving throughout the level. I found that any time I tried to rush through too quickly, I was much more likely to die. This was especially true in these challenging yokai auras that house tougher enemies and could only be dispersed by killing a big baddie within. The only big downside is that the enemies in the 2 levels I played were slightly repetitive, and many that did deviate from the standard enemies were more annoying than creative. For example, these Medusas have incredible tracking, speed to zip back and forth out of your range that you can't possibly match, and did far too much damage in comparison to you. Oh, and they still have a fascination with poison, but at least it was limited to small rivers and pools that could be drained by destroying snake statues instead of that fog shit from the last game. Overall, the 2 levels I played both had interesting design, mostly well thought out enemy encounters, and the loot made me happy to fully explore them and reach the bosses at their end, of which there are 2 in the alpha. First up is Enenra. I have to say, this guy fucked me up for a while. I think I died 15 to 20 times before I pulled out a close victory. This is because the limited amount of healing mixed with his high damage minimized the margin for error. It wasn't a bad thing though, I truly needed to learn how to effectively face bigger enemies one-on-one and come out on top. I complained before the bosses are too tanky, and that still rings true a bit. The thing I didn't understand before is that yokai and bosses have their own ki that once depleted allows you to unload on them while they're completely staggered by every hit. If you damage them enough during this window, you can even do an execution style blow for big damage. To take advantage of this, you must balance your aggression so that you don't get hit and keep the pressure on enough to drain the bar. I love this system because it puts pressure on you to keep the damage up, which can cause greed, and that's how you get slammed. But if you pull off the high risk, you get a hefty damage reward. Enenra has ways to deal with you up close and at range. He'll fire baby tornadoes that track you and summon explosions in front of him. He'll also teleport to you and has a few different melee attacks that he likes to mix and match. At intervals, he'll go beast mode and pull you into the yokai realm. Here he gets a few scarier attacks, namely his tornado spin. If you don't dodge this, he can actually melt your entire health bar. Lucky for you, it's really easy to just run to the side and get a punish on his back, which is pretty much all I did for the whole battle. Smack that booty booty. Just run away until he combos, dodge under his arms, and then slices back up. If you can kite him into the pillars, he gets doused with water, which makes his ki plummet, a nice environmental hazard in your favor that makes melting him easier. Every time I fought him, I could tell I was getting better and better. It especially made a difference once I remembered that ki pulses were mapped to R1 and not L1. Yes, I blocked that rarely that I forgot. The third and final mission of the alpha was a Twilight version of the first, and I was surprised to see that it only took me 3 tries to beat this guy at a level that was lower than the game recommended. He's a ton of fun, though I do wish his damage was tuned down maybe a little bit. The second boss I'm a lot more mixed on. On one hand, I love the few different mechanics it has. On the other, it has a propensity to one-shot you a little too often. It's a big snake that likes to charge at you. When it's not doing that, it'll spit poison, send too many snake heads after you, among other things. The nice catch and where the design shines is that each attack can be avoided in a way that gives you a brief window to attack its head. When you don't do that, you often get a chance to smack that booty. The only part of the fight that slipped me up once I figured this out was beast mode. In there, it breaks off both of its baby snake heads into full-fledged snakes that put out yokai pulses to slow you down, all the while it's charging around like a drill that can melt you if you get caught off guard. If you can kill the baby snakes, you will stun the boss, but I found that they were a bit too tanky to focus on while you had that damn snake charging after you. Instead, I just kept focusing the main boss in the realm and ran away as much as I could until it was over. It certainly wasn't easy, but I felt like I had a decent handle on it by the end. For me, this boss shined less because it felt like hit and run tactics that were the only safe way to ensure victory, and this meant rarely depleting its ki, making for a hellishly long battle. That said, I still somewhat enjoyed fighting the snake, and both bosses overall were impressive offerings for the short alpha. My final thought I note is on the RPG aspects of the game. I've touched on the skill trees, but I haven't mentioned the loot system, leveling system, etc. I didn't enjoy these aspects as much simply because they felt underexplained and bogged down the game for me. Nioh is at its best when I'm moving through the interesting landscapes and taking on demons, but all too often I'd have to stop and read through a boatload of armor and weapons to improve my ability to participate in the aforementioned activities. And I still don't completely get the leveling in this game. The stats tell you what weapons they're associated with, which is great, but the pacing of your damage increases and vitality or ki bumps seems kinda random. One level you get a +2 bonus for damage, then +4 the next, then +1 for the next 2 levels. It's weird scaling, but maybe I'm missing something. For me, it seemed best to level 5 or 6 different stats regularly. I have no problem with this as it is, I just wish it was better explained. Ultimately, this game felt very reminiscent of the first Nioh, but I found that I enjoyed myself far more because I kicked back and took the game as it was with no expectations. The amount of information, loot, items, and mechanics in the game is a bit overwhelming to take in and understand without more direction, and I think the RPG bloat takes the focus away from what Nioh does best. Exploring excellently designed levels will let you partake in the phenomenal combat. I do believe the game wants the player to experiment and figure out what works best for them on their own, which is a fair angle to take. Even with my gripes, I felt very positive about the alpha overall. I'm looking forward to learning more about Nioh in the upcoming sequel when it releases. I would count on my Nioh content happening around the release of Nioh 2, so it may be a while before I touch on it again. With the level of polish the alpha had though, I wouldn't be surprised if we see this game before the end of 2019. I hope you enjoyed the video as it was a bit more rambly than my usual commentary, but I thought it'd be nice to share my perspective. It was a fun pit stop, but it's time to get back to the other projects I've got in the works. Be sure to subscribe for all of that and the eventual Nioh videos to come, and leave a like if you enjoyed today's video. It means a lot to me to know you're enjoying the content. I want to thank you all for watching today, much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.